For a long time, I didn't think I'd ever be able to tell this story without crying. Not the soft kind of crying you do when you miss someone, but the kind that shakes your chest and makes you question why life had to turn out the way it did. But as I speak to you now, my tears no longer come from pain. They come from gratitude, because I've seen what God can do with a broken life. And mine was truly broken once. I grew up in a small, happy home. My parents weren't rich, but we had love, and that was more than enough. My father used to say, "Rachel, joy isn't found in things. It's found in peace."
I didn't understand that back then.
I was just a child with two parents who adored me, a home that smelled like my mother's cooking, and laughter that filled the evenings. Then one day, everything changed. It was after Christmas, on a Sunday morning. I remember the smell of pancakes still in the air. My parents had gone out for a quick errand. They said they'd be back before noon. But noon came, and then 2 p.m., and then a police officer knocked on our door. That sound, that knock, it's something I still hear sometimes in my sleep. They told me there had been an accident. A drunk driver. My parents didn't make it. At 16, my world ended. The days that followed were a blur. People coming and going, funeral songs, flowers, hugs that meant nothing. Everyone said, "Be strong, Rachel. God knows best." But I didn't want to be strong, and I didn't want to hear about God. I wanted my parents back. I moved in with relatives, kind people, but they had their own lives. I was quiet, withdrawn, polite enough not to be a burden. But every night, when the lights went off, I'd cry into my pillow until my chest hurt. I'd whisper, "Why did you take them from me?" But heaven was silent. Years passed. I grew up on the outside, but inside I stayed 16, frozen in grief. When I finished school, I decided to become a nurse. I told everyone it was because I wanted to help people, but deep down it was because I wanted to understand pain, maybe even fix it. Maybe, in helping others heal, I could heal myself. And for a while I thought it worked. I smiled again. I laughed with my patients. I learned to look composed. People often told me, "Rachel, you're such a strong woman." But they didn't know that after every long shift, I came home to silence. No one waiting. No family. No laughter. Just me and the ache I'd gotten used to carrying. Then I met Daniel. He was kind, soft-spoken, the kind of man who listened when you spoke and made you feel seen. For the first time in years, I let someone in. We talked for hours about life, about God, about dreams. He made me believe maybe I wasn't meant to be alone forever. When he proposed, I cried, not just because I was happy, but because I thought my pain had finally found its purpose. Maybe all the loneliness was leading me to this. We started planning our wedding, small, simple, beautiful. I already had my dress. My friends teased me about how often I tried it on. I'd twirl in front of the mirror and whisper, "This is my new beginning." But beginnings can sometimes end before they even start. 2 months before the wedding, Daniel changed. He grew distant. He stopped calling as much. My messages went unanswered. And then one evening he told me the truth. There was someone else. Just like that, my fairy tale ended before it began. I remember sitting on the floor that night, surrounded by wedding invitations and tears. I tore them apart one by one. My chest ached so badly, I thought I was going to die. It felt like God had abandoned me twice. First when he took my parents, and now when he allowed my heart to be shattered again. For weeks, I went through life like a shadow, working, smiling, breathing, but not living. At night, I'd scroll through old photos, trying to find the version of myself that used to laugh freely. But I couldn't find her anymore. One Sunday, while cleaning, I opened an old box I hadn't touched in years. Inside was my mother's Bible. The pages were yellowed, the cover cracked. I held it close, inhaling the faint scent of her perfume that still lingered. As I flipped through it, a small folded paper slipped out. It was her handwriting. I recognized it instantly. It said, "My precious Rachel, when life hurts too much to stand, kneel. God will carry you." I don't know what came over me. I sat on the floor and cried, not the quiet tears I'd been hiding, but deep sobs that felt like they came from years of buried pain. For the first time in so long, I prayed, not a formal, polite prayer, but a raw one. I said, "God, I'm tired. I don't even know if you still see me, but if you do, please heal me." And that was the night something began to shift. Not all at once. Not like magic. But something small, a whisper in my spirit that said, "You're still mine." I started going back to church, quietly sitting at the back, not wanting anyone to notice me. Every sermon felt like it was written for me. Some days, I cried through the whole service. Other days, I just sat and listened, my heart softening little by little. Healing wasn't pretty. It wasn't quick. Some nights, I still cried. But now, there was peace somewhere inside those tears. The days after that prayer were quiet, but something inside me was different. I can't explain it fully, but it felt as if a small light had been lit in a room that had been dark for too long. I started waking up early again. I'd open my mother's Bible and read the Psalms out loud, sometimes through tears, sometimes with a trembling voice. And even when I didn't understand every verse, I found comfort in the words, "The Lord is close to the brokenhearted and saves those who are crushed in spirit." I was broken, but somehow I began to believe that maybe God could still make something beautiful out of the pieces. It wasn't an instant transformation. Healing never is. It came in little ways. The smile of a patient, a kind word from a friend, the sunrise after a long night. It came in forgiveness. That was the hardest part, forgiving Daniel. For months, I carried bitterness toward him, replaying his words, his betrayal, every lie. But one night, as I prayed, I felt this heavy burden in my chest. And I realized I wasn't hurting him by holding on to the pain, I was hurting myself. So I whispered, "Lord, I forgive him. I release him. Not because he deserves it, but because I want to be free." And just like that, something lifted. The next morning, I woke up lighter, not healed yet, but freer. I began volunteering at a small home for widows and single mothers. The first day I walked in, I almost turned back, afraid that their stories would reopen my wounds. But instead, their strength humbled me. Some of these women had lost everything, homes, husbands, children, yet they still sang songs of worship with joy. One of them, an older woman named Grace, took my hand one day and said, "You have the kind of heart God uses to heal others. Don't hide your scars, let them shine." That sentence changed something deep inside me. So I stopped hiding. I started talking about my journey, about loss, heartbreak, and the long road to peace. At first, I shared quietly in small church groups, just a few people gathered around. But each time I spoke, someone would come up afterward and say, "Your story gave me hope." And that was when I finally understood, maybe everything I went through wasn't to destroy me, but to prepare me to comfort others. It reminded me of that verse in 2 Corinthians. God comforts us in all our troubles, so that we can comfort those in any trouble with the comfort we ourselves receive from Him. I began journaling again, not just my pain but my healing, my prayers, my moments of peace. Some entries were messy, tear-stained, but they were mine. They told the story of a girl who thought she'd lost everything and a woman who found herself again in God's arms. Years passed. My heart grew stronger. The bitterness faded. And then one morning, I realized I hadn't thought about Daniel in months. Not because I forced myself to forget, but because my heart had truly moved on. That day, I smiled at my reflection and said out loud, "You made it, Rachel." And I meant it. I didn't need a perfect life to be happy anymore. I didn't need validation or romance to feel whole. I was enough because God had made me enough. But life, in its beautiful way, had another surprise waiting. It happened on a quiet afternoon at the hospital. We had a new doctor. His name was David. He wasn't the kind of man who impressed you instantly. He was gentle, thoughtful, and carried a calmness that made everyone around him breathe easier. He noticed me one day while I was helping a patient, and later that week, he asked if I'd join him for coffee. I almost said no. Fear still whispered, "What if you get hurt again?" But something in my spirit nudged me to say yes. That coffee turned into long walks, laughter, shared prayers, and honest conversations. He knew about my past. I told him everything. And he didn't flinch. He didn't try to fix me. He just listened. One evening, as we watched the sun dip behind the horizon, he said, "Rachel, I don't want to be the reason you forget your pain. I want to be part of your healing." Tears filled my eyes, because I knew this was different. We didn't rush. We prayed together. We waited. And 2 years later, under a quiet blue sky and surrounded by people who had become my family, I said yes again, this time, not out of fear of being alone, but out of peace. Our marriage wasn't a fairy tale. It was real, filled with small fights, laughter, shared meals, and daily prayers. And through every season, we reminded each other that love wasn't about perfection. It was about grace. Looking back now, I see how everything fits. Every heartbreak, every lonely night, every unanswered prayer. They were all stepping stones to bring me here. Sometimes, when I tell my story in women's gatherings or at church, I watch tears fall down faces that remind me of my younger self. And I always say the same thing. Your story isn't over. God's not done with you. Because he wasn't done with me. There's one moment I'll never forget. A young girl once came up to me after I spoke and said, "Miss Rachel, I thought God forgot about me. But after hearing you, I think he still remembers." I hugged her tightly, and in that moment, I knew why I had to walk through my valley, so I could stand beside others in theirs. Now, when I wake up in the mornings and look out my window, I whisper the same prayer every day. Thank you, Lord, for carrying me when I couldn't walk, for hearing me when I was silent, and for turning my ashes into beauty. If you're listening to me now, maybe you're where I once was, broken, tired, unsure if healing is even possible. I want you to know it is. It doesn't always come fast. It doesn't always look like what you expect. But it comes quietly, faithfully, like morning light after a long night. And one day, you'll look back, just like I'm doing now, and realize that every tear you cried watered the seed of the woman you've become. So don't give up. Don't let pain tell you your story is over. Because the same God who rebuilt me can rebuild you too. This is my story. Not a story of perfection, but of grace. Not a story of power, but of faith. And every breath I take now is a reminder that healing is real. Thanks for listening, and if you believe in God's healing, comment, "I believe," below this video. Please like, subscribe, and share with any hurting soul out there.